What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Quill and Hammer Reforging Fiction. I am Trevor.
And I'm Zach, and today we're getting pretty close to finishing up our Harry Potter series, at least for critiquing the films anyway. We are starting today with Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. So, Trev, let's start off in our usual fashion. What do you think went well with the film? What do you like about it?
All right, so the first thing that I want to point out is that they did a really good job at hitting all of the points they needed to. You know, they they did a really good job considering that all of this is set up for the final battle and the payoff and everything. They, you know, got Harry out of you know, Privet Drive. They did the wedding. They did, go into the ministry. They had the whole wood things. They had the conflict between Ron leaving and then coming back and the Horcrux and all of these things. They did a really good job with making sure they hit every point along the way. They got to, Malfoy Manor. They did a lot of good things. So you don't look at the film and think, wow, they missed this.
Right.
They hit everything that was relevant to the story in preparation for movie number 8, Deathly Hallows Part 2. In particular, I liked some of the acting. So I liked the acting. All of it is acting, but there were two different scenes where actors are playing someone else playing themselves. Does that make sense?
Right.
So like you've got the Seven Potters where Harry is playing six different people playing himself. And I think
Right.
that's funny, where like the Weasley twins, Fred and George, take the polyjuice potion and they look at each other and they're like, "We're identical."
Wow, we're identical.
Right.
And then you've
Yeah.
got Floor who you know, Harry is trying to be Floor and she's like, "Bill, don't look at me, I'm hideous."
Bill, look away. I'm hideous.
I knew she was lying about that tattoo.
Like
Right.
it was just funny the way they did it and hats off to Daniel Radcliffe for pulling that off. That was really funny and lightens the mood to begin with. But the second group of people to do that really well um, were the people they kidnapped when they went into the ministry.
Right.
So these people are playing themselves. They're playing their characters, but they're playing their characters as Hermione, Ron, and Harry awkwardly trying to play, Reginald, what's his name, and then the secretary lady, I can't remember her name, and then,
Hmm.
Albert Runcorn or whatever. Like, so they're just awkward and acting so good, but so awkward because they're Harry, Ron, and Hermione underneath. But I don't know.
Right.
I thought it was really well done. And as far as acting goes and things that are funny and good and like spot on, it was that. So you can
I think
imagine.
I think they do a good job with that. It's like you can tell that it is Harry, Ron, and Hermione underneath,
Yeah.
and you can see the nervousness and the lack of confidence when they do things like going down the toilet, flushing themselves in, you know what I mean? All that
Right.
kind of stuff. So it was really well done. I agree.
And it makes me laugh. The just the way that you have to do that, like you can tell that it is Harry, Ron, and Hermione. And
Right.
you can almost see it. So like I'm thinking of when they go into the bathroom and Ron's character looks over the
Looks
stall.
over the stall.
We flush ourselves in. That's bloody disgusting.
like
Yeah,
like you can see Ron there, even though it's a completely different person.
right.
And I don't know, it just makes me smile thinking about it. Because the movie is so serious, there's not a lot of humorous moments because of that I guess those are the two things that I draw towards because they are a little bit of humor. They lighten things a little bit. It just seems kind of fun.
Hmm. I agree with you.
But having said that, Zach, there are some things that I would change, and they're not about necessarily like you missed something here or you did, it's mostly things that are again nitpicky, but that I feel need to be thrown in there somehow.
Okay, so where do you start?
Well, the first thing, I want to start with the Weasleys. So we have this wedding, right? The they escape Privet Drive, they get to the Burrow, and Harry, of course, wants to leave right away, but they're like, Harry, you're still, you're not 17 yet. You can't have leave without the trace or whatever. Like, also, there's this wedding between, Bill and Fleur. You need to stay. But, like, there was no mention of that in any of the previous books or in any of the previous movies. There was no setup. There was no, like, you don't have Bill in the movies at all,
Right,
like and then no Charlie at all coming in. Like there's a brother there. He's the best man. He's the dragon tamer dude. Like if we're gonna bring in one random Weasley, can we not bring in another random Weasley?
right, right.
Like and we could have if we were going to have the wedding in number seven, could we not have set it up just a little bit in book six? Like they're at the Weasleys, for Christmas, and there's Bill and Fleur. Like, we not have done a little something like that just to foreshadow or make it seem like something is going to happen or something good comes up? You know what I mean?
Right. It would have been an easy fix, but you have to throw it in for the beginning of book seven because that's a major plot point.
It
It's where he
is.
talks to Elphie. Is it Elphia's Doge?
Yes.
Where he talks to Elphia's Doge about Dumbledore, and there's the old lady who I think talked to Rita Skeeter, and he talks with her for a minute. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, you have to have the wedding, but you've kind of missed the opportunity to make it natural. And it does sort of feel abrupt, and you have no idea that there's going to be this wedding, and it's like, well, why? But in the book, obviously, you have Bill and Fleur and their whole, I guess it's mostly focused on Mrs. Weasley's issues with Fleur and their conflict there in the book in number six. But um shoot, I just lost my train of thought. But the point is that you're building up to it. It feels natural in the book. You've been thinking about this for at least 1.5 books, and now here it is, and it's like, okay, well, we do have to be here.
Right.
But in the movie, it's just, well, you have to have it in because it was a major plot point, even though we didn't talk about it at all in any of the previous films.
Right. Now, I'm not 100% sure. Um, so I was just wondering, oh, yeah, never mind. I was thinking, when was book seven published? And it was in 2007. So I was trying to think, did they have a reason to be, upset, or not upset, like Game of Thrones a little bit, where they were um like the ending wasn't fully written, so they had to, improvise or whatever. So Deathly Hallows was released in 2007,
Right.
and the films started filming in 2009 and 2010. So like that part was fine. I guess I need to, while we're talking about this, I need to think about the Half-Blood Prince. When was the Half-Blood Prince released? The book.
And you look up the book, I'll get the filming date.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, the Half-Blood Prince was released in 2005.
And they started filming in September 2007.
Okay. So there's no excuse, I guess. I wanted to clear that up before we moved on. Like
They had the material.
they
They
had the
knew.
material. It wasn't a Game of Thrones thing where the book is not finished. Granted, neither of us have seen Game of Thrones, but
Well, you hear about it
you
enough.
hear about it, and you see that meme, like, the picture of the horse. Have you seen that where like the front half of the horse is like
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
majestic and perfect, and then you get to the end and it's like a disaster of
Right.
like it wasn't that as far as source material goes. So they could have put Fleur and Bill into the film,
Right.
into number six. They could have just introduced them during Christmas.
Hmm.
I didn't even think about that when we were talking last week about what we would have changed in that movie, but like if you add that in, then it eases this process so much. You don't feel like it's
Right.
just like, here's this thing, convenient plot point, like it leads up to something.
You know, maybe to be fair to the filmmakers, we didn't think about it. You
We
know what I
didn't.
mean? We
Yeah.
didn't think about it when we were talking about Half-Blood Prince last week, and maybe they didn't think about it either. Even if they had even if they had read the books, they knew everything that had happened. Maybe they just didn't think about it. They thought, oh, well, we don't need that in there. It's not important.
You
You know,
know,
and
Zach, like I want to be mad at you for bringing that up. Like screw you almost, like
I don't know what to tell you, man.
but I'm gonna take the opposite job. Now you and I are not filmmakers. We're just uh we just love books and movies and stories and video games and all of this stuff. And
Entertainment enthusiasts, you
we are
might say.
entertainment enthusiasts. That is perfect. So, as entertainment enthusiasts, we have spent many a day and many a night talking about different books and movies and what we would have changed. And it all started with Star Wars The Force Awakens, I think.
It
That's
did.
where
It very
that's
much
where
did.
we, like, I remember just, we were like, what are they gonna do? they did a really
Yeah.
good job with Rogue One. This is great, you know. And so anyway, not to get off on a Star Wars tangent because we're gonna get to those movies.
Oh, yes, we will. And those will be very in-depth episodes, I'm sure.
Yes, they will. But we didn't we didn't have this, you know, I guess you and I are still learning the process of like, okay, well, when you're thinking about a Harry Potter series, I guess you have to think about what's going to make sense in the next film. Or when you are doing a movie, I guess, and you know there are going to be another episode, you have to think about that.
Right.
And so um I don't want to cut them that much slack for not thinking about it because that's their job. Where
Fair.
you and I are just schmucks that are entertainment enthusiasts.
Fair. I'll concede to that point.
So, um, but then again, what can we expect? Because Star Wars, the sequels, sucked. There was no
Yeah, they do.
planning. There was no planning there. So maybe Zach, let's I don't know why I'm lifting up my microphone and whatever. Let's concede the point that like, okay, they didn't screw up so horribly that no one knew what was going on. We have
Right.
something to follow, and this is just in the end a little nitpicky thing. But I think it's important. I like the family side of things. I like the idea of, yeah, we're having this wedding because even though things are dark and horrible and whatever, like good things still happen. And that's kind
Right.
of what we were trying to remind ourselves of, you know?
Right.
But but anyway, I think we've tangented there enough. I want to talk about one scene in particular.
Okay.
I want to talk about the Percy and Mr. Weasley awkward elevator ride that happened in the books but was not in the movies.
Give us a rundown to help those who don't remember,
Okay,
myself being one of them.
so they, they're in the ministry. Harry is, and I can't remember who all is there, if it's just Harry, or you've got Harry and Ron or whoever, but like they're in the elevator at the Ministry of Magic, and Mr. Weasley comes into the elevator and they go down a floor, or maybe it's one way or the other. I can't remember if Percy gets on first or Mr. Weasley gets on first, but they both get on the elevator. Um, and they just ignore each other, right? Like they don't talk, it's awkward. You've got Percy and Mr. Weasley, and they're acting like they don't know each other because they're on opposite sides.
Right.
I feel like I mean, we talked about Percy's arc last week and the week before, and the week like we like the Percy was wrong arc.
Right.
And he comes to realize that, you know, he was on the wrong side. But like that pride, like it's the most real a character can be, like
Yeah.
he is ambitious, he's wanted to be someone his entire life, just like all of them. When you have
Right.
7 kids and your dad is, I mean, I love Mr. Weasley, but he's the muggle loving uh head of the Department of Muggle Affairs or whatever it's called. And
Right.
and because of that, they're kind of poor because it's not a luxurious position and you don't advance there, and it's kind of a dead end job, and you have, all of this stuff going on where you're poor your entire life, you got 7 kids, you know, you're it's like, Bill was head boy when he was at Hogwarts. Charlie was the Quidditch captain and really good there. And then you've got Percy, and it's almost like a Ron scenario where Ron is just kind of overshadowed. So
Right.
he becomes head boy, but it's not quite as big of a deal because it's already happened.
Right.
But he decides to go into the ministry rather than be a vault breaker, gold digger, whatever. I can't remember what they call Bill's,
Something like that.
something like that. He's a
Like a curse breaker.
curse breaker. Yeah. And then Charlie's, doing the dragon stuff, and then Percy goes into the ministry, and he's trying to prove himself. Well, you can kind of see if someone you know, has been overlooked in his own family, that he wants to do a good job and distinguish himself when he goes into a new post. So he's working really hard to get out of Mr. Weasley's shadow, you know,
Right.
necessarily. And so that's why in Goblet of Fire, he's even extra Percy-ish, where he's,
Right.
trying to impress Mr. Crouch and do all of these things, you know, and then he kind of gets played a little bit. The
Right.
Order of the Phoenix happens, and rather than make him or shunt Percy aside because he's related to Mr. Weasley, a known or member of the Order of the Phoenix, he gets promoted
Hmm.
to Mr. Fudge's whatever, like personal assistant or something. And so there he is. And you don't have that conflict happening there. And then you miss out on that, like, you know, Dolores Umbridge is a wonderful lady, don't you think, Ron? And you should sever ties with Harry, and so
Right.
like you can see the pride where he's like, I don't want to believe that that's bad, and like, he's trying to distinguish himself, and he gets sucked into the narrative a little bit, and then you don't see him slowly start to realize, that things are going wrong. Like, does he really want to be at the ministry where all of this stuff is happening? But he's kind of important in the ministry, but things have changed. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. And
so,
it's the pride of, do I step down or not? Even though I know I'm wrong,
right.
how can I step down and
Hmm.
admit that I was wrong?
And
So
and
I think you miss out on a lot of, I don't know. I mean, I've said this before in the podcast, but the thing that I love most about these stories is the character development. The
right,
character arcs, seeing people grow, because that's what we aspire to do as human beings, is become better, right? And so it's a missed opportunity to show the downfalls of being prideful, but also the forgiveness that families can have. And when you swallow your pride, have a little bit of humility and come back, it's like you can be forgiven from the people who have harmed you. You know what I mean?
right. And they do. He shows up at Hogwarts, and his entire family is there, and none of them say, "Oh gosh, Percy," they're just like, "Welcome home. Let's go."
Yeah.
And not that, not to get ahead of ourselves, but that's half the reason that we not half the reason, but that makes, you know, who is it? Is it George that dies, or is it Fred that dies?
I can't remember.
I can't remember which one it is, but that makes it so much harder because they finally start to bond rather than, it's like you and me and Brennan and Brian, where we finally start to bond a little bit now that we're older and we're not, and
Right.
then something happens. So you see that development and things are happening, and then that tragedy. But they forgive him. They don't hold it against him. He comes back and they're just happy that he's back. And
Right.
it's not an I told you so. It's let's go kill some Death Eaters.
Like, heck yeah.
Absolutely. I'm gonna burn this mother down. Let's go. So that's, and those are small nitpicky things, but it's the character development that we want and that we like.
Right.
And we talked about it mostly when we were going through Pirates of the Caribbean, but like it's the characters that you care about. You don't necessarily care about the plot. You care about the characters. And so when something shifts or when you don't get that resolution that you want, it kind of, you know, grates a little bit because you want that payoff. You want your
One
characters to grow and to see them do well and learn and be better.
Well, in the plot in any form of storytelling, the plot is or should be just a device to allow for the characters to grow. You know what
Yep,
I mean? It's like you invent these scenarios to test your characters, and they come out better on the other side. You're like, that's the point, especially in fiction. It's like all of this is completely made up.
yep,
If you wanted to tell a story of events happening, it's like that's boring. You know what I mean? You
right,
can that's basically history. Nobody loves to sit down and just listen to history. You want to learn about the people who were involved, right?
right.
It's more than just the events happening. You have to show the character development, especially when you're dealing with fiction.
You know, Zach, it really hurts that you brought up that all of this is made up because I'm still waiting for my letter.
Well, Trev, here's the way I see it. I didn't get my letter when I was 11. I never made it to Half-Blood Hill. My satyr never came. My only chance now is for Gandalf to knock on my door when I'm 50. So,
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed, man.
Um, it's funny that you bring that up, but gosh, speaking of a good series, Lord of the Rings, right?
It was
And
good, man.
anyway, I'm not gonna go there. We're not gonna get off on that tangent. We're gonna focus on the task at hand, Zach, which
Okay.
is Deathly Hallows Part Two, Part One.
One.
Excuse me. So the rest of what I've had today are more or less nitpicky things, but I want to talk about the dynamic between Harry, Ron, and Hermione a little bit.
Okay.
Do you remember what happens there? Like, in the books, like they get out of the ministry and they have to go out on the run,
Hmm.
and then for some reason, and we're not going to get into this right now, but they were wearing the Horcrux.
Right.
And it made everyone more prickly, obviously, but Ron was taking it harder and harder and harder.
Right.
Um, but the movie seemed to like put Harry and Hermione in these situations that would make Ron jealous that like
Okay.
doesn't necessarily happen in the book. It's like they're kind of it felt like they were, you know, on and I didn't notice this to begin with, so maybe this is just me over analyzing, but when I rewatched it this last time, it's like, okay, why are Harry and Hermione, so close-ish? Like it's like they're intentionally trying to say, hey, Harry and Hermione could get together. Maybe they should. Did you feel that way when you watched it, or
Well, here's the way that I interpret that. we see those scenes and they're all for Ron's benefit, right? It's
Yeah.
meant to depict Ron's jealousy. And so the way that I interpret it is we're seeing what Ron's seeing.
Okay.
Ron is perceiving them being closer than they are because he's wearing the Horcrux and he hasn't seen his family. He doesn't know if they're alive, and so he's having those doubts and that jealousy. It's creeping in. And so I think that's intentional to show them being close and to make the viewers perceive that it's like, yeah, it's they might get together because that's what Ron is thinking. That's his deep-seated fear is that Hermione is going to pick Harry because he's the chosen one and he has been all along and it's all just been a fluke. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I think those scenes are intentional that way, but that's just my interpretation.
Like I know they are intentional because you have to be a little heavy-handed to show.
Right.
But then it's like when Harry or when Ron runs off and leaves, then you've got this awkward dance scene between Harry and Hermione, and you've got another kind of like awkward little scene where they're like she like runs her hands through her hair or whatever, and it still kind of gives that impression that like maybe they're trying to find intimacy together. And Ron's not there, so it's not done for Ron's benefit. And like when I was younger, I could have thought, hey, maybe this is it's like they're just friends trying to, but I don't know. I I it bothers me now, I guess. Like in the books, they barely speak to each other after Ron leaves. They're kind of, you know, Hermione's sad and depressed, and yeah, she did the right thing by sticking with Harry, but but they're not happy and it's wearing on them and all of these crazy things. So I don't know.
I I never loved the dancing scene. I know what their intention was. It was to show that well, maybe I don't know what their intention was. They were trying to bring some levity back, right? To show that they were, I don't know, they're trying to forget some of the hardship type things, right? And
Yeah,
excuse me, but it did feel forced. And I don't know if they intended it to still seem like there might be some romance between the two of them, or if it was purely meant to be, it's just Harry trying to help Hermione out. Maybe that was what they wanted, was to show that Harry cares for his friends. I don't know. I don't know what they were trying to show, but I don't think they accomplished it very effectively. Um, but at the same time, you have to do something because, like you said in the books, they just sit there. They don't really talk.
right,
It's like they take their turns on watch. They apparate to a new place. They set up their wards and their charms, and then that's it, right?
right.
And I I don't know what you do at that point in the film. It's like it's too dry to just show that over and over, especially when you've already had the prolonged sequence showing Ron's um his frustration. You know what I mean? It's like you see them walking cross country
Mm,
for an extended period of time, and you've got the radio going and so it's like it's already been kind of dry. And so I don't know. I don't know what you do. Maybe you show them doing something else, you know? I don't know. But
Well, let's shift the focus for a tiny bit, I guess. So and I'm stepping away from the books here too, because the books don't focus on anything else. Obviously, it's Harry's story, so you're following Harry, you know?
right,
But if we're taking liberties, let's kind of show what's happening somewhere else.
fair.
You could have like a little Hogwarts scene, or
Right,
more snatchers doing something, or like you could have like just a scene with Fred and George or Mr. and Mrs. Weasley or someone wondering if Harry, Ron, and Hermione are okay. You could do like, you know, Ron showing up at Bill and Flora's house, Shell
right,
Cove or Cottage or whatever they call it, and talking to them and you know, I don't know. You could do something that gets you some information and context on what is happening outside of whatever. Kind of like they have like a little throwaway scene where Ginny and Neville are in the on the train, the Hogwarts Express, and the Death Eaters stop the train because they think Harry might be on the train. Like,
right,
there's a little 30-second scene, and Neville's like, "You idiots, he's not here. Why? What are you doing?
right.
Are you stupid?" Kind of thing. You could have something like that that breaks up what's going on, as long as we're taking liberties with the source content. Let's break up the monotony, I guess.
No, I'm with you. And I mean, I don't think the Neville and Ginny scene on the train is a bad one. I think it's good
No,
for Neville.
right.
And I think you could very easily replace the 2-minute dancing scene with something else, anything else,
Anything else?
you know? And then when you cut back to Harry and Hermione, it can be, you can have the contrast of something, maybe something even a little more lighter in tone when you flip away, and
Mhm.
then you come back and you see Harry sitting outside the tent, and it's
Yeah,
dark and bleak, and it's just kind of abrupt. It's like you've got kind of happy music playing, and then right as the scene switches, it's just silence.
right.
And then it that better portrays the mood. It better portrays their situation. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
that would be my suggestion, I
I
think, to fix it.
I think so. I think I'm with you there. Something, and I don't know what it would be, and it doesn't necessarily need to be from the book. Like the main plot is Harry and Ron and Hermione are looking for Horcruxes, and they don't know where to
Right.
go, and they are kind of, you know, aimless a little bit because they don't know how to get rid of it. They don't know where the rest of them are going to be. They keep going over the same, couple of things, and it kind of doesn't explain any of that.
Right.
And one of my biggest frustrations with the books is that lack of knowledge. Like Harry, it and it almost seems like Dumbledore kind of left Harry in limbo. They didn't
Hmm.
talk about where they could be. They didn't talk about, the Horcruxes could be here or here. They didn't even have a little conversation of like, you know, how did Dumbledore even think to look for the cave, and all of these
Right.
things. Like you didn't talk about that. You talked about these magical items being, getting disappeared, getting disappeared that are disappearing around, Voldemort, but you don't say like, let's talk about significant places in his life, like
Right.
Where would he
When
have
I
hidden them?
That's probably my biggest problem with book seven is that feeling of like, why didn't Dumbledore give him more direction? Like, there
Right,
was no reason for him to not to, even if he wasn't planning on dying that night. And I guess that's probably the jumping off point that J.K. Rowling took was, yeah, well, maybe he was about to, once they got the locket, they were going to talk about where else things could be, but he died too soon, you know. But I don't love that. I still think there's not much of a reason for Dumbledore to have not already told him, like, yeah, these are my thoughts, or
right,
I mean, Dumbledore is a smart man. He could have left memories for Harry to use in the pensive,
right,
so like if and when we get into the books, we can talk about those things. But so that's the backdrop that you're working with. That's the source material for number
right.
seven. And that feeling is exacerbated by what they did in the Half-Blood Prince film.
Yep,
They didn't show any of the memories that Harry and Dumbledore went through, so to say, okay, well, these are the items that I think it is. So it seems like Harry has absolutely no idea what he's doing. It's just, okay, well, I guess there are four more Horcruxes. Don't know what they are, don't know where they are, don't know who could have them. Let's just go apparating around anywhere. It's like it doesn't make sense. I think that's my biggest gripe with both the film and the book.
right. And the that is the hard thing because it's like, well, what are we even doing? Where's Harry going? What? And to be fair, in the book, like that's half of Ron's frustration is like, here we are,
Right.
we have no idea what we're doing, we have barely idea what we're even looking for, and like, what's the point of this? Like,
Right.
we thought Dumbledore left you more, more to go on, and Harry's like, I've been honest with you the entire time. I don't know, and so like, but you don't see much of that in the movie because they didn't set it up in book six. So now it's like, okay,
Right.
well, what are we even looking for? We know that he's looking for the cup, um, but we don't know what else. We know there's supposed to be seven, but like, you've got the diary and the ring, you've got the locket, the cup, Nagini. They're looking for, something else connected to, um, you know, one of the Hogwarts founders, something of Gryffindors or Ravenclaws, and that's it.
Right.
You have no idea what that's going to be, and that's already a mystery because you don't know what that is supposed to be, right?
Right.
So, and then of course the seventh is Voldemort himself, but the eighth, and you don't even know that Harry, has a bit of Voldemort's soul as well. So like, you don't know any of that, but you're looking for seven, and you don't have them all. You don't even know what they're supposed to be, and we don't even know that the cup is a thing,
Well,
in
yeah, there's no
in the movie.
mention of it.
Yeah. And so it isn't, you know, it just they're kind of wandering around. And I guess maybe you don't really need to know necessarily, but like it's like, okay, well, why would Voldemort want to put it in Gringotts? And he doesn't have a vault or whatever, and maybe that's a thing, and and that's why he gives it to Bellatrix. But like, you don't really even know until I think at the end of the movie, Bellatrix is freaking out because
She sees the sword,
she sees
right?
a sword, and it's like, where did you get this? This is, so that's the idea is it's like, okay, well, why is she freaking out about the vault? well, I guess that's the reason, and
Right.
so that gives them a reason to go to Gringotts and then to go to Hogwarts and but like you don't really have that discussion. You don't have that um that lead up a little bit. It's like, okay, well, what are we doing? Well, we're looking for this and maybe something else related to Hogwarts, but we don't, that's the hard thing. If you'd added that in there, even a throwaway line like, you know, we're looking for something of Hufflepuffs and Ravenclaws, I guess.
Well, it could have been easily solved. I mean, you can do it before the wedding. You can do it, the first while they're in Grindelwald Place. Anything. Just have the three of them sit down, have Harry writing on a piece of paper, and say, "Okay, so in the memories that Dumbledore showed me, just kind of retcon it. Like, yeah, maybe we
Right,
didn't see it in film six, but just retcon it.
right,
Have Harry write it down and say, okay, so these are the things that Dumbledore showed to me. These were the memories, and this is what we were speaking about and thinking that they could be. That's all
right,
you have to say, and then it's like, okay, well, we at least know what we're looking for. We don't know where, but we know what we need to find.
right,
And so I think that would fix a lot of the tone and a lot of the I don't know, it would make all three of them feel more like heroes rather than just running around aimlessly.
right, right. Um, Moving on a little bit, I don't have much else to complain about other than I don't know. Most of the things that I had are um related to that. The
Hmm.
struggle of, you have all of this time and, Ron leaving and what happened, and it just seems to take up too much time, but you need it. Um, but then they go to Godric's Hollow. I thought they did a good job at Godric's Hollow.
Hmm. I think
Um,
so too.
so they go to Godric's Hollow, then they go back. The doe leads Harry to the sword. Harry jumps into the little pond. The Horcrux tries to kill him. Uh, then Ron shows up and saves him, and they kill the sword and whatever. You kill the sword, kill the Horcrux, and and then Ron's trying to be, upbeat and everything, and they end up getting, caught by the Snatchers and whatever and taken to Malfoy Manor. All of that happens. The only other thing that I wish would have made it in is Wormtail's death. Um, in the film, it's like he gets stunned by Dobby, you know.
Right.
But in in the book, Wormtail tries to kill Harry, and Harry reminds him that Wormtail owes his life to Harry because Harry saved him, and then Wormtail's silver hand chokes him to death. And I don't know why that happens in the book. I don't know what, like, was that a something that Voldemort enchanted into the hand to like if Wormtail betrays me or goes against my
Right.
wishes or whatever, we'll kill him or what, but like, so that's never really explained. But I like the idea of like regret on Wormtail's face just a little tiny bit, like, oh yeah, am I really gonna kill the son of one of my best friends growing up who saved my life and now I'm just gonna kill him? And you
Right.
have that like flash of regret in his eyes or hesitation, and because of that, the hand. But granted, I don't know if you want to show that in a kid's film. Granted, it's PG-13, so it's not necessarily a kid's film, but I don't know. I liked the idea of that, the, Wormtail's comeuppance a little bit.
Right. Right. I mean, in a perfect world, yeah, it would be I don't know if fulfilling is the right word, but you want to see justice, right? And you want to see Wormtail get what he deserves, but it visually it may be a little more disturbing than what you want. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So, and where you've already got the pretty rough scene between Bellatrix and Hermione, where she's torturing her, and you hear Hermione screaming, and then you see the mud blood cut into her arm. Like that was pretty tough to
It is.
experience, you know.
It is.
But
Yeah.
so I don't know, maybe they thought it was just too much to layer on top, and the Hermione scene is more important, I guess. I don't know.
Just it's fair. I think I would have I mean, because she's, carving into Hermione's arm in the movie, but like I guess you take the liberties that you need something. But I think I might have, like in the book, she's just using the Cruciatus curse,
Right.
Just I say that
Just
like
using the Cruciatus
just
curse.
using that, arguably that is worse than having someone carve into your skin because it's supposed to feel like thousands of knives are poking into you everywhere when you're being, you know, crucioed. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Um, so I can understand why they didn't. I just like the idea of I like the way that Wormtail went out in the book
Right.
because it's poetic justice.
I getcha. So,
But then we end with Dobby coming and rescuing. We end with Dobby's death. It's sad. It's still sad to this day. Um, but that happens. They escape Malfoy Manor, and that's it. Now, did we gloss over the Lovegood house, the learning about the Deathly Hallows?
we did, and I don't know what your opinion is, but I absolutely love all of that. I
Yeah,
love the way they portrayed the Deathly Hallows, you know, having having Hermione tell it and showing it visually in the way that they did, I thought was just beautifully done.
right. So I skipped it. I don't have much like criticism of it because I think it was a great scene. They did a really good job of it. They showed that Mr. Lovegood is just having like a breakdown,
Right.
they did a really good job of it, so there's not much I would change. But in my recap, I'm trying to think of everything that they brought together for the movie and everything that we learned. Is there anything that you would add that we've gone over or subtract or whatever? So we just leave Malfoy Manor and they get to Bill and Fleur's house and then the movie ends. So
If there's one more thing I could add, it would be Harry being nice to Kreacher and Kreacher coming around to Harry. I think that was a missed opportunity. I don't think it would have taken too much time, but to show that all Kreacher ever really wanted was somebody to love him. You know what I mean?
right,
Somebody to treat him kindly.
right,
And as soon as Harry does that, it's like, yeah, he's Harry's man. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But that would be my only other complaint, I think.
I do want to talk about that a little bit. I wish they had because I think it's an important point
Mhm.
because Harry has to come to grips with the fact that Sirius wasn't perfect, you know,
Yeah,
and Sirius was rude to Kreacher, not necessarily because he hated house elves or, but it was what Kreacher represented,
right.
you know, and and Sirius hated everything about Grimwald Place and the Black family and the pureblood BS and all of that. And when he's back in, Grimwald Place and he can't leave and he's dealing with creatures, mutterings all the time, and he's reminded that he's not, you know, he's he's the disappointment of the family, and
Right.
you know, and so he's horrible to Kreacher, and Harry has to come to terms with that like he can still love Sirius, and Sirius can still be his father figure, but not be perfect, which is something that we all have to come to grips with.
Right.
Our families are not perfect, regardless of how it seems, or we. But then to have him come around and realize, you know what, Kreacher really did just want someone to love him, and Regulus.
Mm-hmm.
Regulus treated Kreacher like a part of the family,
Right.
even though he was a Death Eater. And then he found out and he had his change of mind,
Right.
change of heart, I guess. And they try and, figure things out and get everything taken care of. You don't realize that Kreacher was the one who had to drink the potion to begin with, and maybe that's
Right.
half the reason he's insane.
Right.
And then Regulus comes in and saves Kreacher from being. When do we learn this in the books? Kreacher saves, or Regulus saves Kreacher from being torn apart by the Inferi once he and Voldemort leave the cave. And
I don't remember. I don't remember this. It must be somewhere in the beginning of book 7 when Harry makes him tell about Regulus.
right,
Regulus? Romulus.
Regulus.
Regulus. So I think after they make the connection that RAB is Regulus Black, then Harry calls Kreacher and orders him to tell about that event, right? So,
Right. And I like that happens. Granted, we don't need that full story in the movie.
right.
But to have, like you said, just a glimpse of like Harry gives Kreacher the locket and says, "Hey, we're looking for that locket that was stolen," and Kreacher breaks down a little bit, and because of that, he becomes, much more inclined to be friendly. He becomes
Mm,
Harry's man. He goes out and he finds Mundungus Fletcher. He comes back. They're like, "Good job, Kreacher. You're awesome." And then Kreacher is like, "You gave me the locket," and I don't know. I do like that bit of humanizing, not humanizing the house elves. I don't mean it that way, but like it comes full circle, right?
yeah,
Um it's resolving that tension that begins when you first see Kreacher in Order of the Phoenix, and then Kreacher is the one that betrays Sirius, but you don't get that in book 6 or in movie 6. They kind of leave that part out, don't they? And then you have this, like this full circle, like it's the growth, Zach. It's the character growth that we miss.
that's what you want.
But anything else you would add?
No, I think we've talked about everything. And to be honest, the hard thing is that most of my gripes are kind of with the source material. It's kind of with the book, you know?
Right.
And as far as adapting the book, yeah, I still have a few things we talked about that it's like, no, they should have made different choices. But most of my problems are with the book. So I'm trying not to critique the book right now because all we're doing is the adaptation of the source material. We're not
Right.
changing the book.
Right.
So for now, I think I've said my piece.
I agree, and we are going to talk about this in the future because we could go through every single book and critique what we would have changed and
Absolutely.
to be fair to J.K. Rowling, you know, she wrote them, she can do whatever she wants, but but we're not going to get into the things that don't make sense or any of that stuff or changes that we would have made. We're not going to get into that here. But we will eventually because there's a
Eventually.
lot there that we would have changed. But having said that, I feel like as far as this movie goes and, adapting book 7, I feel like it needed to be split into 2 movies. I feel like they ended at a good spot. They hit all of the main plot points that needed to happen. But they're just those, little nitpicky things that portray our characters in a different way than we would like, or uh,
Right.
that we could have done a little bit better to kind of give the feeling, the tone of the film just a bit more whateverness. I don't even know. I'm gesturing to all of it. I don't
You're
know.
gesturing to all of it.
But we are gonna leave it there for now. If you have any comments, anything that you would have changed, please drop it in the comments. We really do appreciate it.
Or
Uh,
if you disagree with any of the points that we made, let us know. Let's have a discussion and see how we can make Deathly Hallows Part 1 the best it could be.
right. So we're gonna leave it there for now. Please like and subscribe for more of this kind of content. Let us know what you want us to cover in the future, and we will catch you next week.
Later, guys.
Later.